Let's take you back now to the start of the August bank holiday, the Friday night. Were you in Hessel, near Hull, on Humberside that evening? Or have you ever taken driving lessons in that part of the world? If so, was your instructor called Keith Slater? On the night of Friday the 26th of August, Keith answered a knock on the door of his home and someone stabbed him to death. Police hope this reconstruction will prompt people who've ever known Keith Slater to come forward and help with the inquiry. Just outside Hessel, there's a wooded area called Little Switzerland. On Friday morning, Keith and his family walked down there for a picnic.
Here we go. See you both go in the end. Very good, isn't it?
Keith had no driving lessons that morning because his car was in for service. But by lunchtime, he'd picked up his car and called into the driving school. He was self-employed and had been franchised to the school for the past 16 months. Keith was a keen rugby player who almost always wore his Hessel Rugby Club tie and sweater while at work.
Get yourself comfy. You both in. Make sure your mirror's okay. That's okay. Now, if you just follow the road round. That's it, now careful. That's it. That's fine, he's got right away, he's coming first. That's smashing.
That evening at 8:30, Keith's wife Carol finished work. She'd just started a part-time job as a cashier. There was a sale on at home base and she'd had a difficult and busy evening.
I had to remember all those codes. I had to print on codes every time I came up with the stuff. Oh.
Just before 9, after a little bit of shopping, they arrived at their home on Bonaccord Road. The children were staying the night with their grandmother, so the two of them came back to an empty house.
But 18 months ago, Ted blocked his drawbridge for the last time and moved here to this...
After dinner, Keith and Carol spent a quiet evening watching television. But shortly after 10:30, Carol, who wasn't interested in the programme, went to bed.
I'm going up now, love.
An hour later, at 11:30, Keith went up too. At midnight, in Northgate, this pub barman was walking home.
Can you tell me the way to Bonaccord Road?
I don't know, sorry.
A few minutes later, at Andy Carr's Taxis, close to Hessel Square.
Alpha 18, 210 Buffet Road to the Silver Cod.
Can you give me directions to Bonaccord Road?
Yes, if you go to the top, turn left, follow the road down, and it's first on your right-hand side.
Is it past the Nolan pub?
No.
The witnesses described this man as stocky, with crew-cut hair, and in his 20s or early 30s. If it was you, please call us straight away to be eliminated from this inquiry.
Keith, is it the police?
The police?
Keith Slater.
Theo!
Keith!
The screams were heard by a couple walking home a block away. They thought it was a party. The couple then saw a young man in a dark coat come out of Bonaccord Road. At 12:25, a man was sighted heading towards the footbridge which spans the railway line and Clive Sullivan Way. It's now 6 weeks since the murder, and police are still anxious to trace everyone who knew Keith Slater and those who learned to drive with him. In particular, they'd like to hear from one young woman. A blonde girl was seen with him several times between February and July at the National Pub on National Avenue in Hull. She was petite, described as stunning, and witnesses remember that she wore a good deal of gold jewellery. Was this you, or do you know who she was? She and Keith were also seen here in Cottingham. She was aged around 20, was smartly dressed, and may well have carried a briefcase. There's another woman detectives need to trace. On the day before the murder, a rugby friend of Keith's flashed his lights at Keith's car on First Lane, Anlaby. It was about 9:15 in the morning. Although Keith's diaries show no lessons booked for that time, a woman with fair or brownish hair was driving the car. Do you know who she was? Mr. Lilly, were those two different women or one and the same?
Well, the evidence is that the descriptions do differ somewhat, but really it is something we must keep an open mind on.
Now, there must be suspicions that Keith was having an affair with somebody whose boyfriend or husband didn't like it, or at least he suspected they were having an affair and took it out.
Yes, this is obviously an area that we've looked at. Inquiries have brought forth many useful lines, and that is one of them, yes.
Now, obviously, this woman or these women have done nothing wrong themselves. Obviously, if they don't come forward after an appeal, there'll be people who are bound to suspect that they're some sort of accessories to the murder. But you desperately need these women to come forward.
It really is imperative that these two women come forward. It is true to say that they have not committed any offence at this stage, but they really must come forward. I would urge also, of course, that if any relative or friend knows who these people are, then please come forward as soon as possible. It really is imperative that we trace these two people.
Okay, now the man himself, who seems to have known something about the area, we've got quite a good description of him, haven't we?
Yes, we have an artist impression which was done by Carol Slater. Carol saw the assailant fighting with her husband as she came down the stairs, having heard the disturbance. And she made an artist impression as a result of that. What I would say, of course, is that that is exactly as Carol remembers him. I wouldn't feel for 1 minute that he has such starry eyes if he's sat at home now or indeed in a pub. But we must say that is as Carol remembers him in the heat of the moment.
Now, someone must have suspicions about a boyfriend, a husband, somebody they know who looks a bit like that. But one thing is that he must have got covered in blood that night.
Yes, Carol was covered in blood because Keith was bleeding quite profusely, and she was covered in blood as she helped him back in. The assailant must have been well covered in blood. What I would say is that there must be someone sitting at home who knows that someone came home during the early hours of Saturday the 27th of August, covered in blood, acting suspiciously. They must hold a question mark against such a person, and I would urge them, please contact us here or at the police station as soon as possible.
If you think you know who that man is, if you think you can help, if you think you know who those women are, if you knew Keith Slater and haven't yet contacted the police, and above all, if you know that woman or those women that were seen with him, please call us right away. 01811 8055, or call the incident room at Hull. That's on 501 222. That's 0482, the code for Hull, 501 222.